It's new. Welcome back, Mighty Vandals, the Tubs of the Club, the Idaho Vandals affiliate on the Big Sky Podcast Network. I'm your host, Dallas Hammer, joined today by brave, bold Brian Marceau.
Good to be here, dude.
Yeah, that's, we're going to pretty much just get right into it, guys. This show is our retrospective, closing the book on the Jason Eck era. We obviously thought about doing this, 5 months ago when Jason Eck left the program. But hey, there was a whole bunch of stuff going on. Thomas Ford came in quite quickly, had a bunch of lead up into spring ball, then spring ball. Now spring ball's over. Time to finally take a look back at the 3 years we had with Jason Eck. So joined with us today is the man in Moscow, Mr. Producer Redacted, Martin Heemstra. Martin, how's it going, man?
I-D-A-H-O! Idaho! Go, go, go!
Hello, I am not doing this live because I am a very tired guy and trying to keep all my energy right now. I'm just talking. They're going to give my quick thoughts. I'm probably not going to be as long as what Brian and Dallas are, but still wanted to give my thoughts about my overall thoughts about what Jason Eck did for this program and what he did for, I'll say, the university as well. First kind of starting out, I'll be honest and say I was a little hesitant only because it was an unknown. To be honest, I didn't really know too much about him beforehand. I think I saw like a DM or two that maybe mentioned him as a thought just because he'd been a position coach here 20 or so years ago, it seems like. I can't remember the exact timing on it, but I know certainly did not read any hastily written articles about who could be the coach or not, just because those are always put together and they're not always the best quality, well-written stuff from time to time. I'm not saying that for everybody, but there are some bad ones. I still overall, I'm going to look positively at what Jason Egg did for us in the 3 years he was here. Yes, of course, I wish it would have been longer, but hey, those 3 years were some of the best times I've enjoyed Vandal football. It got me way more excited. It got me to follow more than just the scores in the box. It got me actively more involved, more what's the word I'm looking for? More engaged with more stuff like recruiting. I know I was before. I still interact with, like, repost all that stuff, but it got me more interactive, like trying to find who it was, just because it's like the coaching staff then made it a lot more fun. I know Coach Ford has done that too, with keeping up with, like, saying, like, stuff people have committed and stuff, and that's been a fun thing for me. He has, like, his staff made Vandal game days fun again. I know the first couple games in the dome were a little slow just because it's a new coach and you don't know what to expect, but it made things more fun. It made some of my friends who maybe didn't come to games as often just for homecoming, because it's homecoming, came up for other games outside of that. I know some of them made the trip for Montana. A couple made it up for the Montana State game back in 2023, I believe it was, and they made it for the Montana home game. That was a sellout on ESPN. Obviously, I know they lost, but still, like, he made everything more fun. And yeah, I'm not going to be too sour about how things ended. It sucks. It sucks the way that it ended the way that it did. Wish I would have been on the off of, like, us lifting a trophy in Frisco, but hey, it sucks, but that's the way life is sometimes. I'm gonna be, and I'll say this is because I'm also a nerd. Like, I'm not gonna bad talk him at all. If people want to do that, they're talking about, like, they're gonna act like he's that one ex-girlfriend that got away, but I'm gonna be honest, I don't care too much. Say what you want to say, guys. I mean, that's kind of, I know I'm gonna ramble, so I'm gonna kind of cut here in just a second. But, like, another thing, just because I'm a little video game nerd like that, honestly, I'm probably gonna use University of New Mexico in the next college football game, because it'll be fun to have that connection with with all the players and the staff that he brought there. I'll be able to play as, quote, Idaho, but not really Idaho in the game still. But it'll be a fun. I'll wrap this up here. It'll be wrapping up fondly, and that's really concise. I'm going to be positive about it all, and you won't ever hear me say a bad mouth about Jason Eck, his staff, what they've all done for the community here in Moscow. And with that, go Vandals.
I-D-A-H-O! I know, go, go, go!
Martin,
That was Martin.
The
joining
fuck
us
is wrong with
live.
you, Martin? Jesus Christ.
But deep throating the camera there was certainly a choice, Martin. Absolutely loved that. Thank you. Brian, I'm going to let you take the wheel first, because I think we've both fallen on very similar paths here. I fully agree with Martin saying, like, I'm not going to talk bad about Jason Eck. The things that he did for this program in the last 3 years are things I'm not going to or neg down for how the ending may have gone. But Brian, I'll let you take the wheel here.
Well, look, the interesting part of the conversation to me that we will also have in the comment section is it's not the summative response. We all know, dude went 26-13 in 3 years, made the final 8 twice. It was one, not the most successful run of University of Idaho football ever, but it's up there. It's absolutely in the discussion, not at the top, but certainly pretty dang close. You know, Tom Kendall says Jason Eck brought the program back from the dead. Nothing but respect to him. And look, you can't talk about Jason Eck without talking a little bit about the before. And just to not beat a quote unquote dead horse, you might say. I remember the last post-COVID homecoming game, which, hey, that was back when, you know, around the nation. If you guys remember, I know this was 1,000 years ago, post-COVID, a lot live sports had people jumping in right away. And it wasn't just in the SEC. It was across the nation, places that tended to have higher attendance. They had extremely motivated people buying tickets immediately. The last homecoming game for Idaho against Portland State was a graveyard before Jason Eck came here. The game day environment was dead. The expectations for the program were dead. We don't try to make ourselves the centerpiece of what we're talking about, but now, having like lived through some fun seasons, it's almost inconceivable to me that Tubs of the Club existed back then, because we were the only show with one of the biggest audiences covering a shitty team pre Jason Eck. And that was all we had. And that's part of why this existed. Look, part of why initially Tubs of the Club got the Jason Eck coaches on as early as we did is because there was no regional interest in Idaho football whatsoever. It was not cared for. It was not valued at any level of media, essentially outside of us and beat reporters. The end. That's a complete, like, Jason Eck resuscitated the program. So
to drop a quick fact in there for you, Brian, 7,034 was the attendance listed at the Vandal homecoming game in 2021.
Yeah, which I don't buy it. I don't buy 7,000. I buy 5 maybe. But that was a homecoming game. You know, look at what we've had the last 3 years. Multiple sellouts, multiple games that I think I'm going to remember for a long time. A coaching staff that was everything they needed to be, both in the wins and losses department and in knowing that if they're going to resuscitate this fan base, they're going to do it themselves. And a lot of work was put in by Jason Eck. A lot of work was put in by other members of the coaching staff, guys like Thomas Ford, who we still have. So, I mean, in the summative sense, which to me is the least interesting sense, Jason Eck era. If the Jason Eck era was not a resounding win for you, if it did not buy hours of fun time and memories you were not having otherwise, then I don't know what good enough is.
Yeah, at that point, I mean, are you really a Vandal fan if you didn't enjoy the last 3 years? And I'm sure there are people that are still up in arms about FCS and FBS. And look, the reality is there's no home for Idaho in the FBS. So this is where things ended up. Paul Petrino struggled mightily in his 4 years, 3.5, I guess, counting the COVID year, 3.5 years in the Big Sky. He went 15-25. Jason Eck came in immediately and went 26-13. I mean, Paul Petrino won 33 games, 34 games in 8.5 seasons. And Jason Eck, had he stayed for another year, most likely would have blown past that, especially with all of the departures that followed him out and whatnot. We'll get into all of that. But man, I can't be anything more than happy about what we saw. I mean, we went from, again, 15-25 in the drop down to the Big Sky when everyone thought, hey, Idaho dropping down from the Sun Belt, they've been competitive, they've won a bowl game, they should go on a tear here, and immediately face planted, immediately didn't do a fucking thing. Line of Fire 95 in the comment section, college football is a shadow of itself, and I think we can bury the FBS FCS argument. I fully agree, 100% agree on
that. Well, what I want to add there is Jason Eck buried the FCS argument. And I'm saying that not the point of this isn't to rehash an argument that's been had 17 billion times in Idaho world. That's a different episode, which may happen if things change for Idaho in the future. Mm-hmm. But we're done with that. That's been relitigated as much as it possibly can. And I'm going to say the reason I bring up Jason Eck is the guy who buried that discussion. Is I'm not using myself as a reference point because I've been open, guys. Idaho joining the Big Sky is what got me back into Idaho football. But I'm talking about going to games. The environment radically changed with when Jason Eck came, and then I mean, like Martin said, it took a minute for Eck to pick up wins, but a minute is like a minute. Look, hey, week 1 against WSU, Idaho back in 2022, Idaho nearly pulled off an upset week 1 of the season. If that didn't put you on notice, I don't know what you're missing. But hey, some people do kind of write off a one FBS game against a new coach, whatever. the shit repeated. But with the winning that Jason Eck brought to Idaho, the game day atmosphere in the dome and outside the dome became infinitely better. And the people I knew who were hardcore FBS guys were finally landing on, you know what? Being good is fun. Having people come to the games is fun. How about we just enjoy fun for a while? Everything's changing. Let's just go to the game. And to me, the conversation about Idaho football buried the alignment discussion and began to focus on what the hell is going on each week. And that, to me, was the resurrection of Idaho football. That, to me, was burying that FBS FCS argument, because Jason Eck made Idaho football something to pay attention to for the game itself, not anything else. Because when teams are garbage, you don't talk about the game itself. You talk about anything else. Because if you're at the games when the team sucks, you're a diehard. That's us. That's the dudes who recorded during basketball Zach Kloss time. We're diehards. But you got to talk about something other than the game to really keep people interested. Not just if you run a show, which you do, but if you're in a parking lot, if you're sitting in the bleachers, if the team's garbage, something else is what's holding you. Jason Eck changed that. The game is what holds people. Is Idaho going to win is what's holding people. What guys look like they're going to be all league was what was holding people, which was a complete paradigm shift from, honestly, more than a decade.
Yeah, I mean, that obviously persisted through, Akey had obviously a nice little spike there, but honestly through the Cable, Holt, Erickson to Akey, Gesser, Petrino era, I mean, other than, again, those there were a couple spikes, just a season where everything clicked. Outside of that, people were showing up to the games to drink in the parking lot, and then at halftime the game would be probably over, and half of the dome would leave because there was no reason to stay for a dog shit amount of football. Line of Fire 95, 100% agree, Brian. You're finishing Dallas's rationale. When we returned to FCS, we still struggled, putting it politely. Eck buried that mediocrity and restored a winning mentality. Nearly 2 decades of wandering in the desert, regardless of our classification. Again, dropped down to the FCS, and it didn't help. James Jacobs in the comment section. I'm not old enough to remember the 80s, so Jason Eck is the only face on my Idaho Vandal Mount Rushmore. Loved playoff football in the dome. And I mean, again, I think we're about ready to move forward off of this topic, but that's Idaho made the playoffs 3 straight years. Idaho won more games than they lost 3 straight years, and I hadn't seen that in my lifetime. Yes, it had happened in my lifetime, but certainly not when I was old enough to like cognitively remember it. Decades upon decades of just lost football. That, yes, the FBS bowl games were awesome. Absolutely loved them, and I've made my stance pretty clear that I'd love to have a home in the FBS. It's not reality right now. Right now, Idaho is a top 10 FCS program and winning constantly. All signs indicate Thomas Ford is going to keep that train rolling, and I can't be anything more than grateful for the path that Jason Eck put this program on, because Brian, I mean, I remember that 2021 season where we were covering the Petrino blowouts of 40 and 50 points when he was obviously checked out and on his way out the door. Half of the team felt like they were checked out and on their way out. And to say 3 years later, the fan base is mostly back. The dome gets loud and rocking. Like it's stuff that I truly didn't think we were going to see again, because it had gotten that bad in that final season.
So I think, look, we're going to talk about individual facets of the Jason Eck time, and overwhelmingly it's going to be us going over different things we love. Like, hey, comment section, get ready for it. We're going to talk about favorite Jason Eck moments. So if you can throw those in the comment section when we get there, we'll read them for sure. Probably going to talk about things like players, things that stood out. But what I do want to touch one thing. The Martin referenced when Jason Eck left, and I'm not talking about the fact of leaving without a title. Most coaches leave without a title. Look at all the coaches in Vandal history that, if you're an old timer, or if you paid attention for a while, those names as in Idaho, Hall of Fame level good guys like Keith Gilbertson, Dennis Erickson, John L. Smith. Do those guys have a title at Idaho? No. Most coaches don't get titles. So like that's just not a threshold that I think is worth having. But when Jason Eck left, hey, the big demerit that some in the fan base have is that Jason Eck left, took a bunch of transfers, and took a bunch of recruits. I want to talk about that for a moment, because to me, that's really the only kind of if theoretical drawback is the fact of how the dismount went in the moment and how the dismount went, with, as far as like players coming and going. So I guess I'll say how I felt about the moment we learned about the dismount during the Montana State game, where we were told players learned at halftime that he was likely going to go. That was a catastrophe, but that was not Jason Eck's fault. That was broken by a national entity. When a national entity like Football Scoop breaks it, it's because Football Scoop doesn't actually do worthwhile reporting. They're a clearinghouse to get views and attention. So that likely came from the New Mexico side, trying to get attention to New Mexico football. Eck can't control that. I don't hold it against him other than to say, like, yeah, it fucking sucked. Watching them get Idaho get their ass kicked while not knowing for a fact. Also, when Football Scoop reports something, doesn't mean it's for a fact happening. It's probably happening.
Brent Pease, anybody?
Yeah, no, it's probably happening. Football Scoop is right more than they're wrong, and it's not really close, but it's not a 100. So, like at the game, getting our ass kicked by Montana State, thinking about is our coach going to be gone or not? And when you're not sure, it's like in a horror film. Scary. What's the scariest part of the horror film? It's when the monster is not yet visible and is still behind that door. The second that door opens, it doesn't matter what the monster is. If you see a 10-foot one, well, at least it's not a 12-foot one, right? Or you see a 20-foot one, well, at least it's not a 100-foot one. So once you're actually confronted with the bad news, like, it still sucks, but it's not as bad as when you think it might happen. That's where I was during the actual Montana State game. So that, to me, watching was as bad as it was. Like, I don't hold that against him, because I think the news would have come from the New Mexico State side. Eck had nothing to gain by being the one to personally leak that. So how people found out, I don't hold that against him.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like in the way that it all fell out, it certainly seemed like this was a done deal. It had been done for a while, and it just so happened that I'm guessing he was probably waiting until after the game to tell the team, and then, hey, the news breaks like at kickoff. I'm frantically texting Brian. Tom Kendall in the comment section was a couple rows down from us, and there's like just this like news starting to slowly spread through the fan base as the game is still close at that point. Like, is our coach really leaving? Is this real? And then obviously the team learned at halftime, and it came out real rough. Tom Kendall in the comment section, that onside kick really gave it away. And in retrospect, it certainly does feel like that was Jason Eck just throwing everything that they had out there to see what was going to happen. It didn't go well, but not many teams had a game plan that went particularly well against Montana State last year.
One did.
Yeah, it just, it probably wasn't in the cards. Maybe if Idaho had a fully healthy roster, maybe there's a little bit difference there. But realistically, guys, that was a game that Idaho wins one time out of 100. That was, it was just rough. It was always going to be rough. The optics are certainly not great, but I don't think that caused a problem with the team. It's not the reason the team lost it. It's just
they lost because Montana State's a better football team, and Montana State beat the shit out of everyone who is not North Dakota State,
including Idaho previously. Mark Trivelpiece in the comment section: we'll always lose our coaches in 3 years if they are good, and fire them in 5 if they are not, or 9 sometimes, Mark. But yes, you're spot on about that. I mean, that's the reality of Idaho. We are not a destination.
The other part of Eck leaving too. Now, this is the part that in our fan base and our Discord, there's more likely to be some antagonism towards, is the fact of Eck obviously had a bunch of Idaho players go with him, and some guys who he'd recruited to Idaho then followed him to New Mexico. You can probably hear my tone, how emotionally energized that makes me. But I want to hear from you, Dallas, because that is the single thing that we get when people are going to talk about any sort of frustration from the Eck time. That's pretty much it, is the fact of taking guys. So, Dallas, Tub Supreme Court, your thoughts on the volume of guys Eck took with him from Idaho?
I mean, it's certainly not what you want, and it certainly sucks. And guys like Line of Fire 95, it just added insult to injury, talking about, obviously, the Montana State stuff. Burl Trout in the comment section: the way Eck left a bad taste in my mouth, just the way Erickson did 40 years ago. all of those very valid points. I look at it as this is college football in 2025. Unfortunately, this is how things go. Guys leave and players follow them, or players decide, hey, this coach isn't here anymore. It's time for me to make a change. Joshua Wood, we could be talking about it a year from now. Joshua Wood having one of the best seasons a Vandal quarterback has ever had. Well, the reason he's here is because Fresno State got a new coach. New coach didn't name him the starter immediately, hit the transfer portal to go find playing time. It was obviously a different situation than your coach left and you followed him, but same thing. His coach left. And what did he do? He went and found a better opportunity. In the comment section, Mark Trivial piece, can we fault them? Things are different. We need to show them the money. Tom Kendall, no loyalty in college football now. Brian, I don't want to turn this into a Terry Golick / athletic department talk forever, but I do want to point out, I think that there was probably some fuckery going on with the athletic department. That's probably why Jason Eck didn't stick around. Yeah, it's also the giant bags of money being dropped by New Mexico. That's certainly going to help. But I mean, we've made it pretty clear how well supported the other programs are at Idaho, and obviously we've seen how the NIL just has not taken off. Idaho has not helped out a ton. Tom Kendall saying the TG factor. At a certain point, when Jason Eck comes in with the, hey, Idaho is a sleeping giant, we can win championships here, and then he's gone in 3 years. Yes, that money is huge, but you got to think there was probably something in the back of his head saying, hey, I got to strike while the iron's hot and take my opportunity. Burl Trout in the comment section, would you want TG for your boss? No, I certainly would not. Certainly would not. But Brian, I want to kind of rein this back in because we're already at a half hour, and I what I really wanted to do was, go over the best and worst moments of the era, and then talk more about that departure. So we'll hit that departure, and then we'll move on. As Mark Trivial P says, also, or the next stepping stone. X goal isn't to be a great FCS coach; it's to be a great FBS coach. I mean, yeah, the guy's from Wisconsin. He played at Wisconsin for Barry Alvarez. He was not going to be the longtime 30-year Idaho coach. I don't think that exists. I don't think anybody would. I am an alum. I love Idaho. If I was a football savant and was head coaching, I can guarantee you Idaho would not be the circle of, man, this is the dream job right here. There's about 135 of them that are better than Idaho. But Brian, to circle back to your original question, it does suck and it hurts. It is painful that these guys left. Obviously, like Jackson X going to follow, but Jack Lane, we were all so invested. We saw some serious flashes of greatness there. He's gone. Keyshawn James Newby, he was going to the draft and then decides one final year with New Mexico. It sucks, but as the comment section is saying, unless Idaho's got money to throw back at these guys, which they don't, the NIL just hasn't fully taken off, and again, Idaho can't really help in that situation, but they could certainly hurt less than they're doing. But that's a whole extra can of worms. I don't love how Eck left, but at the same time, what did we expect him to come out and say, hey, I loved Idaho. There's some great players here. You guys all have a great time in Moscow. I'm going to go coach somewhere else. And you know what? I'm not going to touch you guys at all. It's just not how it works anymore.
Yeah. And I want you to think about it a different way. So when Thomas Ford came to Idaho, he was able to land some recruits almost instantly after, getting some Idaho guys to stay. Dallas, do you think Thomas Ford was recruiting those guys? He came to Idaho before he was at Idaho?
Probably, yeah. Gonna take a
probably.
wild guess and say, yeah,
probably. Alex Pribble took over Idaho basketball. Got a bunch of guys from the Seattle area. Dude had been coaching at Seattle U. Think he was recruiting those guys when he was at Seattle U?
Probably, if I had to bet, Brian.
Yeah. So I'm bringing that up just to say, look, this has happened forever, guys. Like anytime a new coach comes in, part of the pull of that coach is, oh yeah, hey, they have these recruitment ties, which they have been actively building for someone else, but they're now going to use for a different school. That's just how it works, right? Well, like it's a little bit ramped up in the era we happen to live in due to the transfer rules essentially not existing. But this is the world Jason Eck lives in. This is his livelihood. He's making $1.15 million a year at New Mexico, a huge jump from Idaho. And we know, hey, like Mark Trevelsby said, coaches are ambitious guys. They are looking for that next jump, which is to say he's betting his future livelihood on how he does in New Mexico. So no, every other coach is doing the exact same thing. He's not going to bring a knife to a gunfight. This is just the world we live in. As a fan, it sucks. But then we also get a shit ton of transfers who we wouldn't have gotten otherwise if we didn't have the era we live in now. So if you like the guys that Thomas Ford's been able to bring in, guys like, look, Idaho also might upgrade a quarterback. Joshua Wood, if he's 75% of the hype, he's going to be better than Jack Lane, which is, we have to see it happen. But that's just to bring up, like, we get that month where we're eating shit when players leave, and it hurts. It's gut punch after gut punch after gut punch. But then other guys come in. So, like, do I wish there was more what I think of? Tom Kendall called it loyalty. I mean, I'm a little bit old school, so, like, there is a part of me that does kind of think of it that way. But now at the coach level, Jason Eck spent a very long time before he got his first head coaching job offer. He put in 3 good years at Idaho, and he's now trying to put in however many good years in New Mexico. Of course, he's going to bring he's going to bring the best Idaho players he can. Mm-hmm. And personally, I don't hold it against him. That's the world we live in. Every single coach is doing that. Look at Sacramento State. They're bringing in a ton of guys that Marion obviously was recruiting and was aware of when he was at UNLV. Yep. And if Jason Eck doesn't do that, he's essentially signing up. If he has to be a Boy Scout and no one else is doing that, well, no one's going to bet their livelihood on that. By the way, Thomas Ford's an aggressive recruiter too. So he has his own version of doing that to snag people at Idaho. So I don't hold it against him. I don't think it's worth holding against him. It's worth acknowledging it's not fun when all the guys you come attached to leave, but that's not an Idaho specific reality. It's exacerbated when your coach leaves. It's going to be exacerbated when you have good seasons. Look at South Dakota State. They're living with that too. Jimmy Rogers took a good number of guys from South Dakota State to Washington State. This isn't a Jason Eck thing. This is a Division I football coach thing. It's kind of like what Thomas Ford talks about with NIL. You can be upset about it. Like, that's fine. Be upset. But there is a world we live in, and you got to acknowledge what we actually have. So if you want to be bought in on this team, take your second and be pissed about losing some guys, but then get dialed in, because you lose some, you win some, you lose some. It's just more volatile at the end. Jason Eck was not the guy who invented that. He is a product of the head coaching environment of 2025, just like every other Division I head coach.
Mm-hmm. Hitting the comment section real quick. Tom Kendall saying, "Oh, they all have to live in Albuquerque, so there's that." And again, I think that's worth mentioning. I don't really understand why Jason Eck took that job. Again, Idaho, pretty obviously a top tier FCS job. There's not a whole lot about Albuquerque, New Mexico that says the Lobos are a hotbed of talent and a place to grow. But again, the guy's taking the best opportunity that's out there for him. I do want to go back to a comment that was made by Andrew Whipple back at the start of the show. Eck was great. Too bad he jumped so fast for the New Mexico job. He could have still had his house and coached the Cougs. New Mexico is about to be the equivalent of a MAC program with the better teams leaving. New Mexico is a hoops college. He's a good dude, but he jumped ship too soon. I think that's a fair thing to point out. And we heard a little bit around the Palouse that Jason Eck would have been highly considered for the Wazoo job. And would that have maybe changed our thoughts on the guy leaving for the school 7 miles across the way and playing him week 1 of the next season? Probably would have changed things a little bit. But as Patty says in the comment section, hey, Eck's dream job will probably be open in the next 2 to 3 years, being Wisconsin. Mark Trevelpiece says he asked him straight up about that, and Kimberly doesn't like the cold.
That sounds like a non-answer to me.
It does sound like a non-answer to me. I think the bags of money being lit on fire will change that answer. But honestly, Jason Eck wins 9 games this year and a bowl game for New Mexico, while Luke Fickell gets another 5 or 6 win season at Wisconsin. He might be shit canned, and Jason Eck might be a candidate for that job. So, and he would not have been if he was the head coach at Idaho. So, I can't fault the guy for jumping up into the FBS and taking the swings to bigger coaching jobs, because that's what's going to happen. So, Brian, we are 35 minutes in. I think it's time for everybody to hear about the same thing I tell you guys just about every week. If you are looking for a great all-inclusive week-long vacation, do not look past your backyard. Hughes River Expeditions is vandal-owned and operated, and since they have, oh boy, Hughes River Expeditions has been vandal-owned and operated since 1976. Words are hard today, apparently. They are ready to take you on the vacation of a lifetime. You can enjoy a multi-day trip down the Middle Fork of the Salmon, the main Salmon River of no return, the Salmon River Canyons, or even the Selway. You could check out special trips like one to see the Perseid meteor shower. Camp on pristine beaches, Brian. Beaches, always beaches. Run amazing whitewater, hike scenic trails, spot wildlife, soak in the beautiful natural hot springs, and fish some of the most remote stretches of river in the entire United States. Guys, it's the same thing I say every week. It's the best fishing you are going to find in this entire country. Just bring your clothes. Colin and HRE are going to handle the rest. Grab a paddle, catch dinner, and ride the bull all throughout the Gem State. Call them now at 406-540-4450 or check them out at hughesriver.com. As Mark says in the comment section, drink more beer, Dallas. Maybe I need a tub of beers, Mark? That was a really bad pun. I feel regret for even saying it. But, Brian, we're halfway through the show. We want to get into the best and worst moments. So I'm going to do a quick 30 to 90 second. Here's the 3 Jason Eck era years recapped very quickly. Year 1, 2022, they go 7-5, 6-2 in conference. The big win, obviously, being number 3 Montana in Montana for the Little Brownstein, and then had a bunch of close losses. FBS Washington State, FBS Indiana, number 2 Sacramento State, Ball Sacramento State, and then in the playoffs against Sela, lost that first game. And had that one really bad loss against UC Davis when we all thought, hey, this is the year we're going to finally get Hawkins. It didn't happen. 2023, the next step up. They go 9-4, 6-2 in conference again. Big time win against FBS Nevada, who was absolute dog shit that year. Then a win against number 4 Ball Sac State, number 19 Eastern, number 2 Montana State in one of my favorite games ever held in the Dome. And then a playoff victory against SIU. Close losses to number 16 Montana, and again lost eventually in the playoffs to the Albany Great Danes. Had that really bad Weber State loss at the end of the season when Giovanni McCoy was obviously pretty dinged up. Then we go on to 2024 last season. Idaho goes 10-4, 6-2 in conference yet again. Big wins this time. FBS Wyoming, altitude schmaltitude for any of our listeners or watchers of the podcast. Number 17 Albany, who didn't end up anywhere near there. Number 19 Abilene Christian, who also didn't end up near there. Number 25 Northern Arizona, playoff win against Lehigh. Close loss to number 3 FBS Oregon in one of the closest FBS ranked matchups you're ever going to see an FCS school put off. And then a close loss against number 14 UC Davis with backup quarterbacks. And then 2 pretty rough losses to Montana State, Brian. So lots of high points, handful of low points, but across those 3 seasons, Brian, what were some of your favorite and best moments? And guys, in the comment section, please drop them in.
Okay. One preface. The good moments radically outweigh and radically outshine the bad, but we're here for the whole picture. So I'll start with 2022. That Montana win in Missoula. I was there, was with my oldest daughter. The game was sold out. It was a beautiful day. You could tell Montana didn't take Idaho seriously at that time. And by the way, hey, we recorded shows, right? It was after that game that I told people to quit looking at this as we're building something. Something's here. And get your ass to the Dome. Like, it's here as long as it is. That Montana game was absolutely electric. I also went out after the game, was hanging out with some of the guys who cover Montana. And that was where I got to have my very fun discussion with people where I was like, I was just noticing this game. Everyone's just here having fun. And I didn't realize people could do, like, some people, that's just what you do with football. It's just fun. But the fact of that environment, the fact that was the national, it's weird that was the national wake-up call and not hanging with WSU and hanging with Indiana for 3/4 of that game. But beating Montana in Missoula, when Bobby Houck obviously did not take Idaho very seriously, Jason Eck just absolutely outcoached Hauk in getting the fake punt. So not fake punt, the onside kick in the second half, man. That to me was like just rubbing it in Hauk's face.
That was pantsing Hauk was what that was.
Oh yeah. No, that in that first year. The low point was the Davis loss. I'm not going to say the playoff loss. The playoff loss to Southeast Louisiana hurt, but that was a kick-ass game. And Idaho was a fringe level playoff team. If you're a fringe level playoff team and you have a fantastic first round game, win or loss, you just won. So yeah, it was the Davis loss was probably the only Idaho game where I felt like it was reinforced. Yes, there's something fun here, but you might win first round. That's it. There isn't this team has a ceiling. So I'll stop so you can jump in. That's where I was first year, the Montana game, number 1. And that's in the discussion for one of my best football moments of my lifetime. And then the Davis loss was the bottom.
So just to hit the comment section here real quick, Tom Kendall saying of his favorite Eck memories, Little Brown Stein in year 1, the MSU victory, and then the playoff win in the Dome in year 2, year 3, that Oregon game, because Tom was there. And again, guys, we were very close to seeing Idaho put down a team that went into the college football playoff. Line of Fire 95 also agreeing, going into Wagriz and hitting Hauk right in the mouth. Getting the signature win in year 1 was great. Captain 58 playoff game at SLU. Wonder why. Was the first game of the Eck era I got to attend. Very happy for you on that one, Captain. I'm still pretty upset that Terry's great offer to host that game was obviously not that great after all.
It was no offer. There was no offer for those who are curious. There's no offer. Idaho didn't put any of the legwork in to be able to host, to put an actual bid together.
There were things that had gone on at the university at that time that obviously happened, but our initial hearings from the athletic department was great offer. No, it was back and forth. We put up a hell of a fight. Really felt like we were set up to go bonkers the next year. And again, I had said it in the post game of that game of, hey, I think Giovanni McCoy's a little bit healthier, and that's probably a different ball game. And who knows what could have happened that year? But Brian, you're very correct in that Idaho had an easier schedule that year. Montana and Sacramento State, outside of Wazoo, were the hardest games on the schedule. You go 1-1 in those. You beat just about every other team that you're supposed to beat. Yeah, you cough up one to UC Davis, but make the playoffs and have a fantastic first year. For me, my favorite Eck memory is that Washington State game, because we had just come off of 6 years of Rob Akey that was obviously pretty rough there. I had obviously 2009 was incredible. 2010, that team was so close. And then he's gone, and we replace him with a guy who was just as bad with the football, but less charismatic and no one liked because he was a jackass to everyone. So you have all of this go on, and then you hire this big, loud, boisterous man who, yeah, he did kind of look and act like a used car salesman sometimes, but I was like, okay, hey, this guy's like fired up to be here. Cool. At least we have a coach that like gives a shit about, hey, Vandals, come out and support us this year. We want your support. We need the dome rocking, instead of Paul Petrino, we ring the bell. Like, it was a really nice change of pace there. Then you get to the actual football, and Idaho under Paul Petrino rolled over on every single team that was any bit more than a half step better than them. It just, I mean, Penn State's different than Washington State, but and you go and lose some of those games by 70 points, and it's like, man, what are you even doing? Like, so to go across the road, I know it's just down the road, it's not traveling to the other side of the country, but to truly be in that Wazoo game at the end and have a chance to, again, I'm not going to shit on Giovanni McCoy for being his third or fourth start, whatever it was, first start under his new coach, throws a pick at the end when you're fighting an opponent well above your weight class. That was the moment for me. It was like, oh shit, this coaching staff came to play. Like, these guys aren't just going to say, oh yeah, well, we're not going to beat these guys, and who gives a shit about this? It was like, no, we're going to go in there and we're going to believe that we can actually do this. And sure as shit, they almost did. And then what happens? 2 FBS wins in the last 2 years, like huge stuff for any FCS program, much less Idaho. As Mark Trivelpiece puts a nice button on it. What about just having a coach who likes to spend time in the community, who was approachable? I mean, that was the big thing, right? The guy was very open about he's staying in Moscow. He was a frequent visitor of the Corner Club. He was out and about in the community. People knew him. People knew his wife. He knew people's names. Like he was, as Line of Fire says, Eck was so likable on camera too. He was authentic and articulate. I mean, the 2 times we had him on here, he was a jovial dude that handled all of our dumbass questions with as much charisma as you could have ever asked for. So just such a huge change that for me, it was that September 3rd, just seeing, wow, that this is what Idaho football could look like with competent coaching that cares about being here.
Okay, 2023 question for you. Because I think most people are going to say your 2023 memory goes down to one of 2 things. Beating Montana State in the Dome or winning that the first playoff game against Southern Illinois in the Dome 2017.
I'm going to have to go with the playoff game. There's something about overtime playoff games, and I could litigate this for 7 years because I think college football overtime now is extremely stupid. I hate the damn 2-point conversion rule. It's the dumbest fucking thing that's ever been created. Ruined what was the greatest. Yes, go ahead.
Why do you hate the 2-point conversion rule? Because I was like, I watched less college football than you, other than Idaho.
Sorry.
And to me, I know what the rule is. I'm just saying, why don't you like it? Because I just view it as like, oh, hey, like third overtime stakes are jacked, man.
Because I feel like it's now just a big circle jerk of you got one play, take a shot at the end zone. I felt it worked so much more. It was much more realistic to get the ball on the 25 and just go towards the end zone. It was a system that was not broken. And everyone overreacted to, I think it was LSU had a 7 overtime game that went 4 hours long. It was like, oh, we got to change this. And then now what it's become is when you get to the third overtime, it just is lining up, taking a shot in the end zone. Oh, didn't work. Okay. 5 minutes later, one more play. Oh, 5 minutes later, one more play. It's made a mockery of the sport. Anyways, for me, Brian, it's 100% Southern Illinois' overtime victory, or our overtime victory over Southern Illinois. Winning a playoff game was honestly something I never expected, especially in year 2 of the Eck era. And not to just like pour a cold drink of water on everybody. It was also the last game I got to see with my father-in-law. So I had some emotional stakes in that game that I didn't realize were going to be so emotional for me. So that one for me is all time. I will think of that game and the 2009 Humanitarian Bowl as like my favorite Vandal memories forever.
I go back and forth on those two because it's 1A, 1B. I'm going to go Montana State, and I'm going to go 1. We knew Idaho was good, but still, even with how the season had gone, I felt like nationally, Idaho still was understood as like a kind of interesting story, not a good team. And just beating the shit out of Montana State in the first half, they ran like 7 plays. Like that game was to me, the best actualization of the entire strategy Jason Eck had at Idaho of put the other team on ice, get a lead, watch them press. And that's exactly what Montana State did. Now, I was with my grandpa at that game, who he's a Montana State guy. So we happened to be sitting with Montana State fans. And I was just absolutely loud as hell. And I just enjoyed how the Montana State fans like, oh, this is cute. Like, wait till the second half. And then wide right, guys. I don't know if the Dome I've experienced the Dome louder, except maybe some old Boise State moments, in which when I was there, Boise State still kicked our ass. So, but as far as like, hey, moments where Idaho actually won, that was loud as hell. And that to me was similar to how the Montana game was in 2022. That was the for a fact moment of, come on, you guys, this is a good team. This is at least a Final 8 team, maybe Final 4 team. Let's see how things go. And also being back-to-back sellouts because it had been the Montana game the week before that. That's just another, kind of box checked on things that went well for Idaho, to more you might call it vital signs of how's the program actually doing. Can you sell out games? Well, yes, and Idaho did 2 back-to-back, had some sellouts the next season too. So I don't know, like they're still really close though, because the playoff home games, the attendance isn't going to be as good, but that doesn't mean the volume is lower, because the people who show up, especially if you're showing up to a night playoff game, you show up because you give a shit, or you're a student who lives in Moscow and this is what everyone's doing. But at least on the alum side, which is where I sit, I like the intensity of the fan at the playoff games infinitely more than I like in the regular season games. No put down to our older Vandals, but I just think everyone should be standing the entire game at an Idaho football game, especially if you're winning against a good team. And that's how it is at playoff time. So it's really back and forth to me on those two. But maybe if I just talk about ceiling of excitement in the moment I felt, that kick sailing wide, and that Giovanni McCoy to Hayden Hatton pass.
The McCoy to Hatton pass is the thing I remember.
Those two, the McCoy to Hatton and wide right. I'm surprised I was able to even record the next day with how thrashed my voice was.
Yeah, Steve Kurtz in the comment section just saying wide right. I mean, that's all you got to hear. Line of fire 95. Got to go with the playoff win against Southern Illinois. Seeing the MSU coaches destroy their headsets at the Kibbe Dome was quite amazing. Again, these are like 1A and 1B here, guys. Tom Kendall, JJ's punt return in that SIU game. That dome was so freaking loud. I mean, again, how nice is it, Brian, to be recapping the head coach's 3 years and be talking about all of these good memories, because we didn't have a whole lot of those with the previous coaching staff. So nice to see Idaho get on the winning streak. Hopefully, again, this is going to lead into Thomas Ford doing the same thing of putting together these fantastic memories. 2024, Brian, the weirdest season I think I've ever been a part of.
So fucking weird.
I'm going to let you take it on this one. What was your favorite memory of 2024?
So it's hard. Part of it's hard to answer because people who tuned in, this was just a weird injury year. The defensive identity of the team was not the same after about the midway point of the season. Idaho had all of their toughest games without Jack Lane and beat the shit out of everyone except Montana State with Jack Lane. So really weird before and after. My cheating answer for 10 seconds is it's just after the fact. I brought this up on some old episode on, I think last week's episode, one of our spring ball episodes. I think now if I play back the 2024 season, the frustrations about Idaho's offense with Jack Wagner, throw him out the window. That was a masterful coaching job to get what Idaho got out of Jack Wagner that we didn't understand. We now have seen him play more. We didn't understand how limited he was, and we do now. So the fact that Idaho was able to pick up the wins and be competitive the way they were, all the credit
team with him,
all the credit in the world to Schleisner-Neck for it was ugly at times, but all the credit in the world for holding the team together as long as they could. Now, my actual in-season answer, the worst answer is the worst part's the easiest thing in the world, because I already talked about it. Getting our ass kicked in Bozeman and then learning Jason Eck was leaving was the worst part of that season. The best part of the season, I'm going to say Lehigh, and it's because it was seeing a playoff win, being able to have being able to remember that same energy of what the playoffs actually are, playoff night games. That if you're, like I said a second ago, the fans at playoff night games go because they give a shit, and having a house with as many of them as you possibly can it's a high point. And hey, I know Jason Eck talked after that game about, hey, more fans need to show up. That game was still, to me, in some ways, the highlight of the season, because I don't care about the number for a second. The people who showed up. There absolutely were moments where that game got loud. And it's different to do something a second time than a first time. The second time, it was more feeling comfortable and excited with, yeah, this is what Idaho does. We're going to pick up a win in the playoffs. That's what we do. That's where we are.
It felt expected. And, I mean, again, Idaho led from start to finish, and it was this is what Idaho is becoming. Is, hey, congrats on winning your first round game, Lehigh. Now here's your reward, getting kicked in the fucking dick. Good luck. And again, Idaho wins by 3 touchdowns, and it was really no question about it. Absolutely loved that answer, Brian. For me, I'm going to go with the complete other end of the season, because that drive, line of fire in the comment section. There it is. I was pretty damn proud of how they stood toe-to-toe at Oregon. What a day, injuries aside. And Jack Lane completed 11 passes that day, and then I guess 13 if you count the 2 he threw to the wrong team. Shatters his collarbone, and Idaho still, they ended up losing by 10. Idaho had a chance to win that game in the fourth quarter, and that is absolutely insane to me to go on the road.
17-14 with 9 minutes and 45 seconds left.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Again, things break the other way or don't break. Maybe that's a different ball game, but we're talking about year 3 of Jason Eck. When we're at this point, we're all thinking, okay, this is the year we're going to really start seeing that depth evolve. This is going to be that final stepping stone before Idaho is competing for championships every single year. And they go out there and get 10 first downs against the University of Oregon. And yeah, you can say Oregon didn't show up particularly well, and it was a completely different team there than it was at the end of the season. But they were still the number 3 team in the country on those preseason polls. They were still Oregon. They're still trotting out Dylan Gabriel for his 9th season or whatever the hell it was at that point. And Idaho hung with them for almost the entire game, and then obviously followed it up with a win against Wyoming the next week. Those 2 weeks for me were insane. But it was that going into that fourth quarter and then scoring the touchdown in the fourth quarter, really, Idaho's in this. Like the internet started picking it up of like, hey, this might be another Michigan App State kind of deal. And it was amazing to just have that belief for an hour of like, wow, Idaho could do this.
So the way I'd compare 23 and 24 is 23, the highs were real high. 24 was the year of drama, where all the tough games were early. Idaho had a ton of nail biters, some of which felt like they didn't have to be as close as they happened to be.
Definitely had a handful of those.
Yeah, but also like it was that same play calling that gave Idaho the win at Wyoming. Idaho needed 4th down conversions for both their touchdowns against Wyoming. That's just that when the team had what they had with Lane on the shelf, they had to. There were some gambles they had to take. Now, UC Davis is the second low. If the Montana State game had not been a historic low point in my experience as a football fan, I would actually say the UC Davis loss over the first blowout versus Montana State would have been the low point, because Idaho should have beat Davis. We know that. Yep. But with the fact that Idaho is able to do that against a top 8 level team with number 2 and number 3 quarterbacks playing, that again, fantastic coaching job. Also, like obviously the players showed up and did what they needed to. Not trying to say that part doesn't matter. It does. But I think of 2024 not in the same sense. 2023 had my highest of high Vandal moments, and it's not really close, minus maybe that Montana game, 2022. But 2024 was drama from wire to wire. Even when Lane came back and then got hurt again against Eastern, and then he's gone for a week or so, doesn't play against Portland State, which Idaho won handily. But even when in 2024, when you thought you could mellow, you couldn't. Until the Idaho State game, at which point you're like, okay, no, we know Idaho's fine. And the playoff matchup, I don't care about the rate. I mean, look, if you're not hosting into the semis, the top 8 is the top 8. That's just what you get. And Idaho finally got to be the beneficiary of a team they got to walk over. So the playoff game was just a celebration. So I don't know. That's just how I differentiate those 2 seasons. Also, just weird to think that the teams ended at the same level in 2023-24, like their national ranking 8, 7, 7, 8, whatever you're looking at. They were virtually identical, with generational talent shifting and just incredible injury shit luck for Idaho in 2024. So I guess I have to have like more of a macroscopic view to talk about 2024 versus 2023. It was all fun and pretty much all highs.
Yeah, and again, like you said, Brian, Idaho replaces almost the entirety of the offensive skill group, and still went out there, got 10 wins, got to the exact same distance in the playoffs that they did before, survived all those awful injuries, and had a bunch of defensive superstars explode. But
there is one thing I want to talk about too that happened in 2024, which it was actually Tubbs related during the Eck time, is the fact of running the show. Hey, obviously, like and you guys who are listeners know, we don't consider ourselves journalists, but we consider ourselves as having journalistic moments here and there. The Eck era was a different level of being able to just like kind of meet and have fun with people at games, which, hey, patreon.com/Tubbs the Club, support the show, less than cup of coffee a month. But that part, to me, it's hard to differentiate that from Jason Eck, because it's not only the wins that I think of. It's kind of like Mark was talking about with Eck, being a guy who's personable and out in the community. It felt like the DNA or the character of what Idaho football, the fan base, was. It was finally given permission to be its best version of itself. It just needed to have the fans not eating shit the entire goddamn year. And then suddenly people are games. Suddenly people are a lot more fun. Suddenly the online discourse for Idaho, and hey, part of that's our Discord, like the people police themselves. But a lot of Idaho related stuff just became more fun during the Eck time. That's probably the biggest takeaway I have, is at a more personal level, is I got to meet and become friends and friendly with a huge amount of Idaho fans that if Idaho were not good, it probably wouldn't have happened that way.
And Brian, that takes us, we're at an hour, so I do want to make this one relatively quick, but that takes me to the final thing I wanted to talk about a little bit. And thank you, Line of Fire 95. The Tubbs Show in Discord is absolutely next level. Thank you guys so much. It's made this recent resurgence so much more fun, and it is like it. That's kind of the whole premise of why we enjoy the show and why we enjoy the Discord, is the bringing together people that are like, hey, Idaho's fun sport. Idaho sports and fun don't typically go together. This is kind of cool. Like it's developed into a nice community, and I really appreciate that, guys. But Brian, the big takeaway I have is just the state of Vandal football as Jason Eck left it compared to where he found it. When he came into this program, we were talking about that spring like it was the most exciting spring that we'd ever seen. And I'm quite open and honest about thinking, look, for us as fans and people that are paying attention, spring football is worthless. For coaches, it's obviously extremely important, but for us, like, come on. Again, we just watched 4 quarterbacks go through the motions of playing through the spring, and what did we find out? Well, none of those guys are going to be starting next year unless Joshua Wood gets hurt. So you can't really get a whole lot from it. But we came in with Jason Eck coming into spring. It was like, okay, we think there's a bunch of talent here because Petrino had high recruiting classes, but never did anything with them, and nobody cares about this program anymore. And like you said, 7,000 people reported at homecoming. It truly felt like Idaho football was dying, and a lot of people were pinning it on, you're going to the FCS and struggling, and there's so many different reasons that it was falling apart, from the poor coaching, a coach that was obviously disinterested, he lived in Pullman and not in Moscow, and all of these things. And then Eck comes in and completely changes the perception of Idaho football in even 1 year, much less in 3. And now here we are 3 years later. He's gone now. He's moved on. He took most of his staff with him. It took a lot of players. And what did we spend the entire spring doing? Talking about how this program is still set up for success. Thomas Ford is walking into a really good situation. He feels like he's going to be the right guy at the right time. There's a lot of excitement still around the program. Eck excitement around the program, and that comes from Jason Eck and where this program was left by him, and I will forever be thankful for that. Thomas Ford could go out there and look like Tom Cable, and everything could fall apart, but that doesn't change the fact that what he walked into was a significantly better situation than any coach has walked into in the Kibbe Dome since the 90s. And man, I yes, you can be upset at him for the way he left, and sure, I'd love for it to have ended up differently, but man, looking at where this team is and the way we talk about this team and the expectations we have on this team, just because of where the program has made it to, man, I will forever be thankful.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a good breakup. So, yeah, I don't know. Get over it. I care about the 99.999% of the time that was not the breakup. Far more than that, the minor part we brought up on the show. And hey, Line of Fire saying, I'm uber optimistic for the Ford era, but even if it goes sideways, Eck proved it could be done here. Huge. Yes. But I mean, the other thing I want to bring up is you and I have brought this up on the show. I've talked about it. I don't care if I'm repeating myself. The moment we knew Eck was gone, I've got receipts, guys. I wanted Thomas Ford. Because we had seen, we knew from having gone to Jason Eck events, we got to meet Thomas Ford. We knew what kind of dude he was, and he's the kind of guy that you're happy to have him running the program. He gets it. It's style points will be a little bit different with Thomas Ford than with Jason Eck, but big picture, he gets it. Two, we knew if he took the job, it meant he really wanted to be at Idaho, because when Ford left and is at Oregon State, that's kind of a decision tree for you. Are you going to try to work up, the coordinator route? And which in that case, the smart money would have been to decline the Idaho job. Or do you really want to be a head coach? And obviously Thomas Ford really wants to be a head coach. I just know this also from the reporting we did. If you guys remember back in the day when we covered the Jason Eck coaching search and the Thomas Ford coaching search, the Thomas Ford stuff, our updates were essentially on our Discord. We did a little bit more talking about the Jason Eck news because it happened in slow motion versus the Ford was super fast. But Thomas Ford was offered to come over by Jason Eck prior to those guys having had coached together. So Jason Eck made a good call there. Obviously, we saw the works of Thomas Ford as a special teams coordinator and running backs coach. We saw what it looked like when he wasn't running those units.
The running backs were not a problem last year, but that special teams unit was a complete 180 from.
Oh God, yeah, we saw that. We saw that change, so we know he knows what he's doing. But if not for Eck bringing him into Idaho, then obviously it's someone else who would be here instead. So thank Jason Eck for the contributions he made to the program, for the fun times he added to my life that absolutely were not going to be happening if had the change not taken place. And I'm thankful for Eck for setting the program up to be successful in the future, and for Thomas Ford to kick ass in 2025.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better, Brian. That's it for us, guys. We are over an hour mark at this point. Thank you, Martin, for your pre-recorded goodness and deep throating the camera for us. Thank you guys for hanging out in the comment section and dropping in your comments and thoughts on the Jason Eck era. If you're listening to this live, great. Thank you again for doing that. If you're listening to this on recording, hey, send us some tweets. Tell us what you liked, what you didn't like, what your thoughts are on Jason Eck. Feel free to engage with us. We'd love talking about it, because man, we are approaching the dire season of no Vandal sports until the fall. So with that said, patreon.com/Tubs at the Club, like Brian said, it's less than a cup of coffee for per a month. It's the best place to hang out and talk Vandal sports. There's threads for every single sport you could dream of, and they're all moving pretty quick most of the time. With that said,
go Vandals.
All right, Martin changed some stuff on me here, so we're going to see if we can get out of this show.
Grandpa correctly. Dallas, how's it going over there with the controls?
The controls show that there's a different outro video, so I don't know what's going to happen when we end it.
This is producer Brian doing a terrible job of even finding what we're going to play us out with. So we're just going to call it good. See you guys Tuesday.